Let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a seriously fascinating perspective on how we perceive progress, endings, and that ever elusive finish line. We're constantly moving through life looking for that next stopping point. But as we're going to see when we look at the data and some really cool psychological concepts, our whole understanding of reaching the end is kind of fundamentally flawed.
To kick things off, think about how we actually know when something is, well, over. In movies, it's super easy, right? The screen fades to black, the credits roll, the lights come up, boom, done. But real life? It doesn't work that way. Think about a friendship that just slowly faded away over the years. No massive blowout argument, no dramatic final scene, just fewer and fewer messages until one day you realize it's entirely in the past. It really goes to show that endings are rarely a sudden movie credits moment. Heck, sometimes a student walks out of their last day of high school without even realizing it's the absolute final time they'll see some of their classmates. Crazy, right?
So the crucial takeaway here is that closure often exists entirely in our heads. Endings are defined way more by our perception than by reality. They exist in our awareness. We often only realize something has ended way, way long after the fact. There's no actual physical finish line we cross. It's literally just a psychological realization. And that brings us to how this deep psychological need for closure actually creates a total illusion.
Section 1. The illusion of the finish line and why we crave milestones.
There is this intense tension we feel every single day between certainty and continuous progress. On one hand, we've got this intense need to know exactly where we stand. Think of a kid on a road trip asking, "Are we there yet?" over and over. They ask because humans are just incredibly goal-oriented. We crave clear milestones, and a kid simply can't grasp the abstract concept of highway miles. Now contrast that with the reality of continuous, uncharted journeys, like studying a new language. Students are always asking, when will I be fluent? But here's the catch. Learning a language has no clear finish line. There isn't a magical threshold where you suddenly know everything. It highlights this massive friction between our deep need for a clear endpoint to stay motivated and the reality that most progress is totally continuous. But hey, what happens when we do finally reach that destination we've been hyping up, only to find it's a bit of a letdown?
Section 2. When destinations disappoint. The reality of arriving.
Well, that's where hedonic adaptation comes in. This psychological concept completely explains why achieving a huge goal, like finally getting that high test score, bagging a big promotion, or visiting a super crowded tourist trap you've seen online for years, often leaves us feeling surprisingly empty. We always imagine the future to be profoundly better than the actual experience turns out to be. We expect the destination to change our lives forever. But because of hedonic adaptation, we humans just quickly bounce back to our normal baseline level of happiness. It absolutely validates the idea that the pursuit of goals often matters way more to our well-being than actually crossing them off the list.
Now, this whole dynamic shifts dramatically depending on whether or not we actually know the end is coming. Just think about the multiple false endings in The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. The main journey takes up the first 3 hours, but then there's an expected ending, and another one, and another. Watching that in the cinema for the first time without knowing the runtime is a totally confusing emotional roller coaster. You keep expecting closure, but you don't get it. Compare that to watching it at home, where you can literally just glance at the clock and know exactly how many minutes are left. All that suspense, it just completely evaporates.
And that leads us to a really fascinating, somewhat provocative thought. Uncertainty actually enhances our emotional experiences. Think about real-life endings. Scarcity creates value, right? If you know exactly when the last day of the school year is, you cherish those final days so much more. The last conversation before a friend moves away feels incredibly emotional. If something lasts forever, or if you can predict exactly how it ends, it kind of loses its meaning. But at the same time, sudden, unexpected endings, like a company shutting its doors overnight or getting dumped out of nowhere, leave us totally reeling because we aren't psychologically prepped for that sudden shock. So if destinations are often an illusion and sudden endings are jarring, where's that leave us?
Section 3. Embracing the in-between. Finding value in the messy middle.
Instead of obsessing over that finish line, we really need to shift our focus to the journey itself, what we like to call the messy middle. The fancy academic term for this is a liminal stage. Basically, it's an in-between phase of transition where you are no longer what you were, but definitely not yet what you will be. Pop culture actually nails this concept with Simba from The Lion King. He totally represents that super awkward phase where you aren't a dependent cub anymore, but you are absolutely not ready to be king. You're just not quite there yet.
And when we break down these transitional, liminal life stages, it's clear they're a bit of a mixed bag. Take teenagers, no longer kids, not yet adults. Or university students, not entirely dependent, but not fully independent either. Now, the advantages here are huge. You get this incredible freedom to explore who you are, figure out your identity, with way fewer permanent responsibilities. But man, they also bring a heavy burden, deep uncertainty, tons of pressure, and a pretty much total lack of stability. Even so, you could easily argue that these messy, transitional stages of life are actually way more valuable for our personal growth than the stable, predictable ones. All this inevitably brings up that classic saying, it's not the destination, it's the journey. But honestly, that's really only half true. While the journey gives us all that essential growth and experience, the destination is still absolutely crucial because it gives us purpose and direction. Think about studying for something like the IELTS exam. The journey is that messy middle where you're putting in the hours and actually learning the language skills. But the destination, hitting that target band score, is what gets you out of bed to study in the first place. You genuinely need both. Without a destination, you have no direction. But without the journey, the whole thing loses its meaning. Success is really about the process, not just the outcome. Now, let's pivot a bit and look at what happens when progress doesn't exactly go as planned. Section 4. Failed futures and persistence. Why progress isn't a straight line.
Consider some of the wild, abandoned innovations we've seen over the years. Nuclear-powered cars, 3D televisions in literally every home, replacing all our meals with tiny food pills. At one point, people thought these destinations were completely inevitable, but they were scrapped. The tech wasn't there, the costs were way too high, or let's face it, society just didn't want them. It's a great reminder that technological and societal progress is completely nonlinear. Failure is just a necessary part of innovation, proving that not everything that seems destined to happen actually comes to pass. And on a personal level, leaving things unfinished is incredibly common. Just look at why so many students drop out of university, or why we buy massive piles of video games that we never actually finish. The core truth here is pretty simple. Starting is emotional and exciting, but finishing requires deep, gritty discipline. We lose our motivation, our planning falls apart, and let's be real, our digital devices provide an endless stream of distractions that absolutely wreck our ability to follow through on complex tasks.
But hold on, because quitting isn't always a failure of discipline. Sometimes it's literally the smartest move you can make. This challenges that old-school advice to never give up. In so many fields like business or economics, knowing when to pull the plug on a product or just knowing when to walk away is an incredibly active, powerful decision. Knowing when to stop is often far more important than just blind persistence. And this ties directly into real-world choices, specifically the economic principle of diminishing returns. Just think about how putting in extra hours studying or working eventually yields less and less productivity. In hour 1, you see massive improvement, but by hour 3, it's just medium. And by hour 5, you're barely getting any return on the energy you're investing. Pushing yourself mindlessly toward a finish line when your returns have completely tanked is just plain inefficient. Knowing when to stop, rest, or pivot is a crucial life skill. So bringing all these threads together, from false endings to liminal stages to diminishing returns, we arrive at a completely new way to evaluate our path forward. Section 5. Navigating the unfinished journey. A new way to evaluate our paths.
Because even in that messy middle we talked about, structure is absolutely essential. If we're going to navigate without a clear finish line, we have to build our own systems. Whether you're managing a massive group project, launching a startup, or even mapping out a debate argument, clear logic, set milestones, and tracked progress are how you survive the chaos. You've got to divide tasks into clear phases, set manageable deadlines, and use things like progress bars or checklists. That way, you know you're moving forward, even if the absolute end is completely out of sight. Having structure is often the real secret sauce that guarantees success. So the ultimate takeaway from this explainer is this. Strong, critical thinking, and frankly just living a good life isn't about crossing one singular finish line. It's about understanding exactly how and why things unfold the way they do over time. It's realizing that life is entirely about navigating uncertainty, managing those super awkward liminal transitions, and finding real meaning in incomplete journeys. We are defined by our process, the logic we apply, and how we handle the messy stuff along the way.
I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on as you look at your own life. When you evaluate your goals, your unfinished projects, and exactly where you are right now, ask yourself, Are you rushing so fast toward the finish line that you're blinding yourself to the journey? Or are you finally ready to embrace the in-between and find the value in the beautiful uncertainty of whatever comes next? Think about it.